Well, our correspondent Siddhant Sibal joins us from Hamburg for more details. Siddhant, is there any update? Trump and Putin, the first handshake at G20, has it taken place, and what are the details?
Well, Anil, as of now, the only detail is that the retreat is right now taking place, and we saw those visuals. Prime Minister Narendra Modi sitting next to the French President Emmanuel Macron and sharing some light-hearted moments. But those are the initial visuals from the retreat, and we saw that handshake between the German Chancellor and Prime Minister Narendra Modi when she welcomed, she is the hostess, she welcomed Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the G20 Summit here in Hamburg. Of course, the focus has been on terror, and agenda has been laid by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The priority in this, the biggest summit of the year, is terrorism. That has been a concern for not only India but for rest of the world, whether you are in London, whether you're in Kabul or you are in New Delhi, because that's one thing that's impacting a lot of people. Here in Europe, where I'm standing, terror has impacted in a major way. We saw major attacks in France, and of course this time around, since this is a big summit which is taking place in Hamburg, the government didn't want to take any chances. Security has been beefed up across the city so that there is no untoward incident. But terror is the main priority, and the agenda has been set by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And this is not the first time that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is laying down the agenda. In 2014, his first G20 summit, this is the fourth G20 summit by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which he's attending. He talked about black money issue. He raised that issue, and finally, after he raised the issue of black money, it became part of the communique, the final communique. And today, what we all know as automatic exchange of information is a product of deliberations in the Brisbane summit in 2014. And since then, there have been summit in China and Turkey, but more or less they were economic. But this time it's different. This G20 summit is vastly different from the rest of the G20 summit which we saw, because economics is not the agenda. This time it's politics. This time it's about new policies. Remember, there has been a change of regime in Washington. This is Donald Trump, the new US president's first G20 summit, and of course a lot of hype, I would say, about his visit to the G20 summit, because he is meeting a lot of world leaders this time around, including the Russian President Vladimir Putin. And this meeting comes at a time when there have been allegations of Russian involvement into the hacking during the US elections of 2016. So a lot of things on the agenda, and especially this news coming on North Korea, India raising its concern on North Korea just before the summit began. So this is another major development from India's side on the issue of North Korea. North Korea just tested the inter-ballistic missile, and that has been a cause of concern, especially for America, which had called an emergency UNSC session just 2 days ago.
Siddhant, purely looking at in terms of three issues: free trade, climate change, and migration. Three issues where there seems to be somewhere Trump seems to be isolated on these three fronts. Would you say at this point of time it's going to be a tightrope walking for Trump in the G20 summit, considering the three fronts that we spoke about? He seems to be not on the same page as compared to the other world leaders.
Well, it's right, but on the issue of terrorism, he has been raising his concern. That's one issue where the world has been talking in a similar voice. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been talking about CCIT, Comprehensive Convention on Terrorism, that calls for a common definition of terrorism. Terrorism, one thing where the world unites, but there are other things, climate change and free and fair trade, that will see a divided world. The final communique might see differences of view, and of course Donald Trump being isolated more or less on the issue of climate change, at least because well, he was in Europe just a month ago at the Sicily summit, G7 summit, and immediately after the G7 summit he withdrew from the summit, from the Paris Accord, and that obviously caused a lot of heartburns, especially across the Atlantic in Europe. And there have been frosty relationship between the German Chancellor and the US President. So that is one thing which people would like to mend. Yesterday there was another bilateral between the Chancellor and the US President when he arrived in the city of Hamburg. There was a readout by the White House which said that the talks focused on the crisis in the Gulf and North Korea, but did not mention the issue of climate change summit. But that is one sticking point. On the issue of of free and fair trade, well, that's another issue. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, when he was at the informal BRICS meet today, raised the issue of protectionism. That's an issue which has been concerning a lot of countries. Most of the countries, especially in the West, have been building barriers for free flow of information, free flow of trade, people, and that impacts people working in India, because India is a global service center, and India has a lot of people who are going to various countries providing services. So that impacts India a lot, and that India has been raising a lot. Finance Minister in his lot of speeches in New Delhi has been raising this concern. Prime Minister raised this concern in this summit which took place, with the meet which took place, the BRICS meet which took place here in Hamburg. So that's one issue. And before Donald Trump arrived in Europe, in a tweet he also raised concern about China's stance on trade. So that's another issue that might see the world speaking in different voices.
Okay, Siddhant, let's wait for that family photograph of the G20 leaders, which is going to take place in a little while from now. Thank you and appreciate you joining us with all those